All right, welcome back. Dave and Tiff back here after a week break. And, we took some time off to kind of get some other things rolling. But as the week progressed, more things come into play. And one of the things, I guess we'll focus some today on the college athletics. We do know, of course, there's the MLB and the NBA getting ready to start. We've talked about that. Our guest today is going to be well, I guess it's a little bit of a family show, Tiff. We're going to have your mom, Cindy Lewis, longtime writer and columnist for the Star Advertiser. And I'll start with this, Tiff. Was it hard to get her to come on today to, fit us in? Or because that's your mom, it's one of those things, anything for you, son?
It was a combination of things, but now knowing that you're wearing an SC shirt, my mom being a UCLA alumna, when she logs in and sees you wearing that cardinal and gold, she may come on and then log right off. So hopefully she will stay with us for the entire interview.
Yeah, it's in a way it's coming under a little bit of a stressful situation because of what's happening with the Star Advertiser as an organization. And sometimes when we think about this pandemic, we forget. It seems to me, Tiff, like I come across little things or little businesses that you forget that they get impacted by this pandemic as well. We know about the tourism industry, we know about the restaurants, we see that a lot on the news, but media, as we have alluded to, sports media went to a nothing state in terms of locally. There is some content here and there, but when you don't have games, you don't have any action going on, it really nullifies us to zero. And your mom being a sports writer for the Star Advertiser, that took an impact. So we'll talk to Cindy Lewis about that and get more into that kind of thing. But let's swing a little bit to college sports a little bit, because it kind of came out in the Star Advertiser today, as we talk about the Star Advertiser, that the University of Hawaii Aloha Stadium have been in talks, as you'd expect, but they kind of came out with an article today about how they're kind of looking at different plans upon which to actually have football games and volleyball games, which are the immediate things coming up at the Stan Sheriff Center and Aloha Stadium. And we've talked about this, Tiff, about, if we were to have football, how do we do it? If we were to go in with the fall schedule of sports, women's volleyball, how could we do it? So, I'm happy that they have been in talks and are actually looking at different options. And we've seen how Korean baseball do it. They do some creative stuff, but I guess it's it's happy for me that they are not completely shutting it off.
Oh, definitely. And they're just trying to figure out, especially with Aloha Stadium, with that first game against UCLA, supposedly being that first weekend of November, or of September, rather.
It might be November.
It could be November. Who knows when college sports come back? We don't know. But like you said, Aloha Stadium, September, first week is when UCLA is supposed to come out and play Hawaii. And like you said, with how Aloha Stadium is supposed to socially distance fans within the seats, and we both have gone to games, whether it's been going to watch as a fan or going for working purposes, that a lot of the fans are moved down from the yellow section, from the top bowl all the way down, just because there wasn't enough demand that merited people to be in the yellow section. Now with the COVID-19 precautionaries, the measures that you want to run, you might have to open up the yellow section, especially for football, and not a lot of those sections are 100% safe. They're not 100% sure that it's safe for people to be up there. So it's what, June 29th, you have 2 months and maybe a week until that first game happens, with all of these safety precautions having to be put in order. And as you read the article within today, that they're putting in plexiglass in the restrooms and having to do some certain things for the food establishments, but especially for the safety of the fans wherever they're sitting, they will have to figure out ways to socially distance people in whatever section they are, and then hopefully the upper sections can be safe enough for fans to be up there.
And I've always come with the attitude of, let's we understand what you need to do to maintain social distancing to prevent the spread. And that took some time to kind of really get comfortable in terms of how to go about doing that. But I always felt like you could do sports, and Aloha Stadium, which they're kind of looking at, is instead of just selling as many tickets, you section it off. And like how we're seeing with restaurants on a much smaller scale, where they have taken out some tables so it's spatially set out. They even crossed off seats or tables where you can't sit. You could do that maybe in the seating setup over at Aloha Stadium, where you block off or mark off certain areas or entire sections, if you will. But however they want to do it, instead of 20,000 people coming to a football game, it might be 10,000 and spaced out, or even more. I don't know, but I felt you could do it with fans, and even selling tickets, you could possibly sell it like maybe because a seating chart, you can sell where you can sell. And if it's a family, you can say maybe it's families of 4, you can get together, and then there's 2 seats separating, and then another 4 or 2, so forth and so on. Now, is that logistically challenging? I'm sure it is, but you could do it. So I'm hoping that they go ahead and try to do something versus, not saying no fans at all. You could really have an experience. And like, we work at a radio station, right? ESPN Honolulu. How cool. We've always done free tickets. You call in with the trivia question. How much more of a prize is it to get a ticket, because you're going to have less, right? There's going to be quantity less. And so radio stations like ESPN could have these contests which could actually build up into more of a fever because of the fact there's less tickets to have. So again, you've talked about it being creative with less fans, but doing things like the pictures in certain seats and selling them, and corporations buying those. I mean, you could have a lot more fun with it, I think.
You talked about the supply and demand, and like you said, with the restrictions, with Aloha Stadium being 50,000 at capacity, if you're having to limit it to say 15, maybe 16,000, that demand is going to go up. And what is really going to hurt is that walk-up crowd, because as the season, as every season progresses, and this is true for all Hawaii teams, and I've been guilty of this from time to time too, is that you're a fan of the team. But if your team is doing great, if they're playing a name brand team and you don't have season tickets, but you see the team is good, the opponent is good, let's go and get a ticket. Let's go get a couple tickets. Let's go to the game and let's watch them in person. That walk-up crowd is gonna take a huge hit with these type of restrictions. It is what it is, but at the end of the day, you're looking for the health and safety of not just the players, but of the fans that are going to attend these games.
Just thinking out loud, like, I know they're going to want to take care of season ticket holders, right? So if you have a limited seating capacity, let's say for football, the season ticket holders might take up 80% of whatever the capacity they give up. And like you said, the walk-in crowd is going to be like, hey, what about us? Maybe they got to do kind of this rotating lottery for season ticket holders, where you're not going to get to see every game. And these are just these inconveniences that I think everybody's going to have to kind of bear some brunt if you want to allow fans to be in games. But I mean, the bottom line is, I'm glad Aloha Stadium, they're looking at ways and trying to be creative and trying to find the best possible way to have fans. And I think if you're a student athlete, and for crying out loud, if anybody else, you want to have fans. If you're going to do it, let's have some fans in there.
The fact that they're being proactive about this and they're not waiting until the last minute, and that's been something that has been thrown out at this athletic department within the fan base for years, is that it's been reactive and not proactive. And sure, it's 9 weeks away from football supposedly starting here at Aloha Stadium, but again, they're being proactive. And like you said, you may not be able to take care of all the season ticket holders, but those are the first ones you have to take care of, because there are a lot of people that have already sent in their season ticket, the money, the seat licensing to keep their tickets for this season. So you have to take care of those people first. And then once you take care of all the season ticket holders, then you can release it either game by game or however you do to get as many people as you can for every home game if we have a season.
Let's go a little bit on the mainland here. And, football, people say, well, you know, the professional sports have to run because of the money involved. Well, if you look at college sports, there's a huge money issue there as well when it comes to college football, because every college is dependent on the football revenue to make up a huge part of the budget. So it came out that the University of Washington cut 15% from their athletic budget for this upcoming academic school year, which is kind of in a flip when a little earlier you had the University of Tennessee AD Philip Fulmer saying, hey, we're going to fill up our stadium, all 100,000 people are going to come and we're going to have football. So you're seeing a couple of different avenues of how people are looking at, or how schools are looking at it. But I think the Washington announcement of budget cuts, I think that has to be a factor. In University of Hawaii, you can't do it with less revenue. You just simply can't.
Well, you can. And the two schools you talked about with Tennessee and UW, both are affiliated with Power 5 conferences. Tennessee with the SEC and UW, Washington with the Pac-12. And so a lot of money from both the SEC network, the Pac-12 network, and then all the TV contracts they have for all the regional and national broadcasts, they're set to lose a ton of money. And you see how UW, their head coaches, Boise State did this a few weeks ago, that their coaching staffs are agreeing to a percentage of a pay cut just to do whatever they can. And even though it seems to be not that much money, every little bit helps, because everybody is penny pinching and looking at the books and trying to find ways to, as we said, to be creative, but also to reduce as much costs as you can, because there's not a whole lot of money to go around this year.
Indeed it is. And speaking of cuts and budgets affecting businesses, let's bring in our guests coming in. I'm going to press the button here to admit. Joining in our Dave and Tiff podcast, hopefully we'll get it together, is Cindy Lewis, a longtime columnist and writer with the Star Advertiser. And Cindy, can you hear us okay?
I am. Hi, aloha. Let me, I'm in the process of changing my virtual background. Can you hear me?
I can hear you well. You have a awesome virtual background. I got the sunset and everything. That's
actually, that's sunrise in the backyard.
Oh, sunrise. Wrong side of the island.
Yes, Dave. Yes, Dave. What you need to do is be a friend of my mom on Facebook, and every single morning there is a picture of Kaelepulu Lake, or Enchanted Lake, and there will be a different sunrise picture every single morning.
Well, I am a friend, and I see those pictures, which is really great. Nice scenic look. By the way, Cindy, I know you're an avid canoe paddler, so you like to get up early in the morning. Did you paddle this morning?
No, right now HCRA is under the ACA guidelines, the American Canoe Association guidelines of social distancing. So they're not allowing us to go. They're not allowing us because there's no insurance. However, I've been able to paddle twice a week on weekends in a privately owned canoe. And we social distance, and we wear masks when we go out. So the last couple weekends I've been out on Saturday and Sunday.
So describe that background there. I see Honolulu and BULL. Oh, there we go. It's the Honolulu Star Bulletin. Okay.
Yes. I'm wearing my Aloha shirt.
Ah, yes. Thank you so much for joining us and that great backdrop there. And let's talk a little bit. First of all, thanks for coming on with us. And I'm going to start with this. Tiff and I talked about how we've been talking about how the pandemic has affected different industries, different businesses. It has affected sports media and media in general. So tell us, if you can, how the Star Advertiser was affected personnel-wise, content-wise, business-wise, from the time the pandemic hit up until now.
Well, it started back March 23rd that they decided to furlough 8 people in order to qualify for the PPP, the paid from the government. So I was among the 8 furloughed. It seemed very random. The weird thing is that I was considered an employee and I couldn't go look for work because we're in a union. but I wasn't getting paid. And initially they said go on unemployment, and then the PPP came through, and so I got the PPP for 8 weeks. And then when the PPP ended, they weren't sure what they were going to do. They told us, well, you go back on unemployment. And then the bombshell we're laying off 29 people came. So negotiations been going on for the last couple of weeks to save Hawaii News. And so the 29, they were going to be laid off. And then I wasn't sure what was going to happen to me because I was on this involuntary furlough. And they discussed that potentially I could be involuntarily furloughed until February. So, okay, and you may have to cut this out if it doesn't happen because it's supposed to be announced today, but sadly, you have breaking news.
Oh, I wish I had some music for this. I don't. Go ahead, Cindy.
I actually have breaking news. And like I said, the nice thing is you can edit it. That the announcement is supposed to come out today, if not by tomorrow morning, that the company has agreed to accept 12 people, 8 of whom were on the initial layoff list, and 4 who took voluntary layoffs. And what that means is after 14,145 days, I am no longer working for a newspaper in Hawaii. I agreed to take a voluntary layoff, and why I did was we were guaranteed that those who volunteered would save someone else's job. So I decided I've had almost 40 years in newspaper work in Honolulu, and that I'm hoping that whoever I saved will have 40 years.
Wow, that is, I'm getting a chill just hearing that. And
You're telling me, Dave.
Yeah, Tiff, you have a question.
You're telling me, Dave. Mom, like you said, a lot of people have been following what you do, whether it's been whether it's been the Star Bulletin, now with the Star Advertiser, those that have followed you from Pacific Daily News. A lot of people feel that it's just covering the game itself, but I've known you my whole life, obviously, and you've always told me that your favorite part of being a sports writer is getting to know the people, getting to know the athletes from beyond just the playing court or whatever game or whatever field arena they play in. Who are some of these athletes that you have really enjoyed getting to know throughout the years?
Oh, Lord, that is just a good question, by the way. Good job, son.
Good job.
You know what? Let me preface this by saying that when I taught a couple classes at UH in sports writing, and what I tell my students is you can never get overwhelmed by who you're interviewing. So you need to treat, regardless of who it is. It could be Magic Johnson, it could be June Jones, it could be anybody, but just treat them like you're interviewing a 12-year-old little leaguer, because you have to treat everybody the same. Otherwise, you can't do your job if you're in awe of who you're trying to talk to. That's really hard. I think my absolute favorite interview with Rafer Johnson, who was the 1960 Olympic decathlon winner. I got told like 20 minutes before he arrived, back when you remember when the Easter Seals used to hold the Taste of Honolulu?
Yeah.
Rafer was going to be the bell ringer that opened the Easter Seals, Taste of Honolulu. I got sent down to the Hilton Hawaiian with no time. Back then the internet wasn't really accessible, so with absolutely no time to really prep. Fortunately, he went to UCLA, and I knew that. I knew about his Olympic background. But no, what I'm saying, why him going to UCLA is that his daughter at the time was playing for UCLA, Jenny Johnson. So I'd seen him a couple times at volleyball. But seriously, I had no real background on him other than I knew he won the 1960 gold in Rome. and that he was Bobby Kennedy's bodyguard when he was assassinated. Because you'll hear on the tape in '68 that Rosie Greer says, "Rayford, get the gun," after Kennedy was shot.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
yeah, I mean, that was a great thing. So I came, we went, we had a great chat. Somebody walked through the Hilton lobby and goes, "Rayford, is that you?" It was a guy. Rayford played 4 sports at UCLA. And there was a guy who was walking through the Hilton that had played freshman basketball with Rayford their freshman year, and he hadn't seen him since then. So that would have been like 1958-ish. So that was kind of cool that we just happened to, one of his UCLA classmates happened to be walking through the lobby at the time. So great story. I asked him, I said, "Do you ever talk about that night in '68? And he goes, "No." I'm like, "Okay, tell me about Rome." So we talked a little bit about that. And in 1996, I was lucky enough to go to a UCLA Cal-sponsored Centennial Journey to Greece. That was a sports archaeological tour. And it kind of combined my couple loves, sports, archaeology, history. And one of the guest speakers, besides Rayford Johnson, was Peyton Jordan, who was the Olympic track coach in 1968 in Mexico City with the Black Power salute. So you can actually Google probably my stories from '96, talking about my trip to Greece and talking to great Rayford Johnson and also Peyton Jordan. And Tiff was fortunate enough to meet Peyton probably around '98. And I know you have an autographed poster of Peyton when he was winning some Masters track meet.
Yes.
So that's a cool thing. You know, of course, all the years of covering volleyball and covering basketball. I was the beat writer for basketball in mostly Division II back when Chaminade was fabulous. So I got to cover. I didn't get to cover the Virginia game, but when they decided to, the forerunner of the Maui Invitational was Chaminade's Christmas tournament in '84 that had Louisville, SMU, and drawing a blank, but Chaminade beat both Louisville and SMU that had John Koncak on that. So that the 4-team tournament at the Blaisdell on Christmas Day. It was the forerunner of the Maui Invitational, and because of that success, it got moved to Maui, and the rest is history in terms of ESPN picking up that tournament. So that was always fun, and because that I was seeing a lot of the ranked teams, AP Top 25 ranked teams in between the Rainbow Classic and the Maui Invitational. The great national AP basketball writer, Jim O'Connell, says, "Hey, we have a vote opening up on the AP Top 25 men's poll. I think you should have it." You see more preseason Top 25 teams than anybody in the country. So that is why Honolulu has the Top 25 vote in the AP men's poll. That was kind of fun through my friendship with Jim O'Connell. Like I said, I loved covering basketball. One of my favorite teams, though, is the '92 UH baseball team that almost went to Omaha. People like Billy Blanchette, Randy Vollmer, and some of the NCAA teams that I covered from when men's basketball went to the NCAA, like Trevor Ruffin and then, of course, I always tell Anthony Carter that he owes me a trip to Madison Garden for that, unfortunately, breakaway slam dunk attempt that hit the front of the rim, bounced back to midcourt, and Chris Herron turned it into a layup, and Fresno State went on to win that game and went on to Madison Square Garden instead of the Rainbows. So I still tell AC, you owe me a trip to MSG.
Mom, if you had a piece of advice for a young aspiring, not just sports reporter, but just a writer in general, what would you get? What would be your number one or top couple pieces of advice for them?
Well, as I mentioned, one of their things is don't get overwhelmed by who you interview, because you can't do your job. Secondly, I would think it is, and I was fortunate enough with the Star Bulletin when we were the afternoon paper, that you already knew the score from the morning paper. So I had to do something different. So I had to tell the people, the players' stories. So my advice would be, get beyond the numbers, go beyond the facts, go listen to their story and let them talk, and just go off the interview from there. Just let them ramble, and bring up and try to maybe personalize as much as you can. Try to be relatable when you interview, and it's getting harder and harder given my age. But the cool thing is that being able to cover college athletes, I have to stay up on the vernacular. So I know that sometimes one of the athletes will look at me and go, "Wow, you're so with it." So I think that's kind of one of my favorite, a couple tips I would give. Don't be afraid to do the hard work and quit relying on the internet. Back in the day before the internet, we had phone books and people actually had phone numbers listed. And it's harder now because people have cell phones and you can't have their, and you don't know their cell phones and you don't know how to track them down. And seriously, I have a 30-year-old phone list on my computer that I have always kept adding to. And unfortunately, I see a lot of dead people when I scroll down looking for numbers. But I also have numbers of players that don't live there anymore, but their parents still have that number. And I will call and say, "Hey." And I was trying to reach Jamie Payette one time, and her parents were still listed on my list. And I said, "I know Jamie no longer lives at home, but I need to get a hold of her." And actually she's married to, I'm drawing a blank, Todd, who also officiates basketball, works for Ko'olina.
Todd Apo?
So I was trying to reach Todd Apo, but since he was married to Jamie Payette, that I knew from Wahine volleyball, I called Jamie's parents and said, "Hey, trying to get hold of Jamie." So I think those are kind of my biggest things: is don't rely on the internet. Don't be afraid to call people. Don't be afraid to ask people, saying, "Hey, you might not be able to help me, but you have a number for somebody who could." And just remember history. There was time when Don Coryell passed away, the former great Chargers coach. And I decided that we should personalize the obituary because he coached at Punahou at one time.
Oh.
So I called Harry Piccaro, the former great basketball coach at Farrington, who played football for Punahou around that time. I was guessing. So I called Harry and said, "Hey, were you playing for Punahou when Don Coryell coached?" And it happened he did. So he was able to share a memory that we could localize the obituary for Don Coryell. So I think that's important. Nothing is ever really useless trivia, because at some point you might need it. So, and I'll give you another useless trivia right now. Did you know that the blue that I'm wearing for the Honolulu Star Bulletin is one of the colors of the Detroit Lions? What they call it is Honolulu blue. And it is the specific color that was used on the masthead of the old Star Bulletin. So I don't know why, I believe it was somebody from Detroit when they were looking for colors, had been stationed out here during the war, and that they liked the blue that was the signature color of the Star Bulletin masthead. So Honolulu blue and the Detroit Lions We are forever linked.
Wow, that is so interesting. Wow, that's like three solid trivial things. Rayford Johnson was a bodyguard for Robert Kennedy, and now the blue is connected with the Detroit Lions. That is unreal. Oh my goodness. We're joined here by Cindy Lewis, and I guess after that bombshell of an announcement you just made formally with the Star Advertiser and the Star Bulletin, I got to ask you, how long did you have to deliberate over making the decision that you did to take the voluntary layoff?
Well, at one point, they were not accepting volunteers. And the great sports writer, Brian McInnes, who accepted his layoff, he was on the layoff list, called me up and sweetly said, "I consider you my work mom. What should I do?" And I said, Brian, we went through this in '99 when we were under court order to remain open with the Bulletin and they were trying to shut us down. I said, the paper is too valuable. Something good will happen. We will be saved. And that was my belief in '99. And I said, Brian, stick it out for 2 more weeks. There's not, just hang on, and then he decided to go. And, he's so talented and he has a couple job offers. I will not be surprised if he picks up a job very quickly. And so when that happened, and then on, things were moving pretty quickly. And on Thursday, we got notice that one of the proposals had been to the company from the Guild to accept layoffs and voluntary ones. That finally management came back and said, yes, anybody who voluntarily takes the layoff, it will save somebody's job. And when I heard that, I'm like, that's all I needed. So, like I said, I'm at the end of my career. And, I probably had a few more good years in me. Of course, I had good years left. But there was also a possibility that I was going to retire at the end of the year anyway. And that the only reason I wanted to hang on was to cover men's volleyball next spring, because they will win a national championship. You heard that here first. I'm convinced that if men go back and have a real season, that they will win the national title in 2021. And I have not covered a banner-raising team since '87. So I really wanted to go out on that high note. So that was my thought. So that was my thought processes. And but you also asked one other thing about favorite teams. I love the '82 and '83 back-to-back Wahine championship teams, but I have a special affinity for '87. My son was born the year before, and in '86, when they got eliminated from the NCAA tournament, Tiff joined me on the airplane back to Honolulu in San Francisco, and we got to board first because he was 9 months old, and I'm standing there, and he knew his numbers based on the Wahine volleyball uniform numbers, and that was some of the first numbers that he could say. He'd go, number 8, Martina Sensorova, or something. It was kind of cute. Well, yes, it was cute. It wasn't kind of cute, but the girls, the Wahine, all started filing in, and I'm like, oh look, Tiff, there's Auntie T for, T Williams. Oh, look, there's Auntie Susie for Suzanne Ege. Oh, look, there's Auntie Mahina for Mahina Alaneke. Oh, look, there's Auntie Tita for, Tita Ahuna. I'm sorry, Mahina Alaneke, Tita Ahuna. And I just kept going, oh, look, there's Auntie so-and-so, Auntie so-and-so. And the woman standing next to me goes, wait, you can't possibly relate it to all those girls. And I'm like, yeah, kind of.
Wait, this was 86?
87.
87.
Oh, so I was 86 when Tiff was 9 years old, and 9 months old, and we were on the plane back after they had got eliminated in the NCAA tournament. But that was funny. That was 86, and then, yeah.
How was 9-month-old Tiff on an airplane coming back from the mainland? Terrible.
How was he or why was he?
Oh, how was he? He was 9 months old. And we were on the plane back after they had got eliminated in the NCAA tournament. But that was funny. That was 86. And then, yeah. How was 9-month-old Tiff on an airplane coming back from the mainland?
Terrible.
Terrible.
Oh, how was he or why was he?
Oh no, how was he as a passenger, 9-month-old Tiff, on an airplane 5.5 hours coming back from the mainland to Hawaii?
I was on the plane so you could board first.
I can tell you this, until he was 2.5 and illegally on the plane, because, we just said, no, he was 3 and you're only supposed to be 2, but we just told people he was 3 so we can get the free airfare. Don't tell anybody. Until the last trip we made before we started paying for a seat, I would say he was the perfect model passenger. The point when my husband, my former husband, Tiff's dad, was flying by himself, people would get off the plane going, we never even knew there was a baby on the plane, because he was really good. All I can say this is when he was 3 and being a little fussy on the way back, the only thing that would calm him down is me singing the Huma Huma Nuku Nuku Apu Wa'a song and doing the hand motions. And that's it. That would keep him quiet.
For 5.5 hours. But Dave, the key word was, she said was.
Yes.
Not is, was.
Now it's like, oh my God, you're a terror on airplanes, huh?
Oh,
Yes.
not at all. Okay, so that leads me into another story, cute story. My son really wasn't speaking, but we're on the airplane, and you know how they give you all these, you read the screen and give you all the English and, all the different languages as to how to, safety stuff. He would look, and we as a family used to watch sumo a lot. And this would have been in '88. He looked at the kanji and he goes, sumo. And then he looked at the Korean words and he goes, Olympics. So this was right after '88 and the Olympics were in Seoul. So it was so weird that he didn't really speak. He recognized Japanese and Korean language symbols.
And yet I took Spanish in high school and college.
Sí, yo lo creo, es verdad.
Because you already knew it. That's why. Why take any more? You knew it since you were 3. Don't take the Asian stuff.
If I may, one more quick story. I promise, I'm only half Portuguese. It could be worse if I was slow. One of the more memorable interviews that I had to do was with Victor Garcia, Senor Garcia, Serge's dad. And he was playing out at Turtle Bay in the senior PGA Tour. And Sergio had just won the Hawaiian Open over at Waialae. And I suggested to the sports editor, I'm like, hey, wouldn't it be kind of a cool story to go, because Victor was on the bag for his son when he won. And Victor is the head pro at this course outside of Barcelona. And I suggested that, hey, that'd be kind of cool to go talk to him and see, get his feelings about, how it was to be on the bag. And now he's playing in the PGA Tour. And I did a little research and saw that he was the head pro at a course at Barcelona, the Mediterranean, I believe. And, my Spanish was so rusty. But all the way up, going up to Turtle Bay, driving from Kailua, I practiced a couple of phrases and also familiarized myself with his course. And so when I got up there, the late, great Bill Baccarin, who ran all the PGA media for years, I walk in and I said, Bill, I'm looking to speak with Senor Garcia. Is he available? And Bill says, yeah, but he doesn't speak a lot of English. I said, oh, that's fine. I'll be fine. So, Spanish really isn't that familiar in Hawaii. You just don't hear a lot of it spoken. At least you didn't at the time. And so I interrupted Senor Garcia's breakfast, apologized for my español es muy horrible. But I also, with my Portuguese, we managed to wade through an interview to the point where he said, your Spanish is better than my English. And he goes, and I know that you understand what I'm saying. And I do understand your questions. In the meantime, my photographer is sitting there just going, what? So And sports editor says to me, "So how was the interview?" And I said, "Interesting. I had to do it in Spanish." And he's like, "Oh, good."
Wow, bilingual at that. Oh my goodness.
B.
Wow. Well, hey, Cindy, I don't want to take all of your time, but first of all, I want to just say thank you so much for all the work you've done throughout the years covering sports. I mean, so many of the things you just mentioned here today, flash bugs of memories of times gone by, names. I mean, it was just great to hear that, but thank you for all, and I'm sure whoever's career that you saved, your legacy will continue with that person as far as sports journalism in the Star Advertiser.
Well, thank you for your kind words. The one thing I will miss, although I think I will reinvent myself, and I've already talked to a couple people, I think there's a credential in the future from the arena. The sad part, and my son knows this, we're the only mother-son duo in sports media in the country. And I've been blessed for going on 10 years to sit next to this amazing radio guy that I'm so proud to call my son, but even prouder to call my colleague. And we have had some really great road trips together. And it's not everybody that can say that their son's okay with hanging out with mom on road trips. But he also knows that I like to drive. And if he needs to go 2 hours to go to, where were we? Iowa State, because he wanted to take a picture of some arena. And we got to take pictures with, the Cyclone or whatever it was.
Hilton Coliseum.
Yes. And even when we cruised around UW and Seattle, and he just knows that mom loves to drive, and I had no problem driving 2.5 hours to go somewhere if that's what he wanted to do. And to our regret, the Field of Dreams was closed during that one time we were in.
Oh, that's what I would want to see in Iowa. Oh, wow.
So thank you to my son, and hoping for many more years of listening to his broadcast, and yours as well, Dave.
Oh, thank you. And he's been a great partner. And want to tell you again, Cindy, thank you so much for all your work. And we definitely are I'm definitely looking forward to your reinvention and how you'll be covering the media and sports in the future.
It will be interesting.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mom.
That was Cindy Lewis, Tiff's mom, and some great words from a career professional, Tiff, that, I didn't know that. You guys are the only mother.
The only mother-son, yes.
Wow, that is something else. That in the country, not just in the state.
In the country, yeah. Then it's when we went to the regional in 2015 to Iowa, and Wells Fargo Arena, and there was a guy that was Roger Riley he was working. He's with the Iowa Tribune, or one of the papers in Iowa, but he was also working for stats for ESPN, and he had heard that my mom was right next to me as a sports writer for the Rainbow Wahine, and so he ended up doing a story on the side based on finding out that my mom and her son were covering Hawaii volleyball in Iowa.
Wow, that is something else. Something for the scrapbook, indeed. Hey, let's go right to Tiff's Corner, because I know you got always some juicy tidbits in there.
All right, Dave. So we've talked about the KBO. We've talked about the German Bundesliga, Premiership coming back to England. How about this past week, Saturday, the first major U.S. team sport league came back to action, and it restarted in Utah. The National Women's Soccer League began their Challenge Cup this past Saturday. How cool is it that the first league to resume action since the COVID-19 pandemic began, it is not only a soccer league, but it is a women's soccer league? How cool is that?
I think very cool and very smart. I mean, this is a time for all the so-called minor sports to maybe get a leg up, because all the big ones are not on TV. So whether it's the women's soccer, WNBA, this is a great time to capture some audience. I mean, for crying out loud, if we're watching Korean baseball, I'll watch women's soccer and women's basketball more than I have ever before.
Exactly, and also something we've brushed upon many times during our podcasts. Last week Thursday, the San Francisco Giants sent a letter to season ticket holders that obviously games at Oracle Park, their home facility, won't be played, or they will be played, but they will not have fans due to the pandemic. And so something we've seen throughout the KBO, soccer leagues around the world, the Giants are going to allow season ticket holders to send in an image of themselves that will be placed on a cardboard cutout and displayed in the stands during the home games. It's called the Giants Fan Cutout Program. Cutouts made of weatherproof material. They're placed as close to the season ticket holder's seats as possible. And also, if you're not a season ticket holder, here's another way to market your team. For $99, the team is giving options to non-season ticket holders to have their cutout images displayed. And I have to give a shout out here because my future mother-in-law, who is a very big Giants fan, was the one that told me about this. I had no idea.
Well, that really gives a feather in her cap as a fan, because a fan is one thing if you just watch the games, but when you find out that kind of information ahead of someone in the sports media like yourself, hey, that's a big feather in the cap for your future mother-in-law. Kudos to her.
Kudos to her. And also finally, and this is coming 126 years after the flag has had portions of a Confederate emblem on its state flag. The state of Mississippi yesterday, I don't know if you saw this, but a bill passed in the House and the Senate to replace its state flag. And now the bill will go to the governor, who said he will sign it into legislation. Mississippians will vote on this flag replacement in November. The power of sports and the NCAA has helped to advance the ball in the state of Mississippi.
I don't think people, especially in Hawaii, realize, like when they see all this stuff on the news about Black Lives Matter, and maybe some people thinking of why is there such this big emotional movement kind of uprising against, we haven't seen that since the 60s. But I was shocked when I went to Atlanta back in 97 now, this is how many years ago, that the Confederate emblem was very prevalent in not only state flags, but homes were having it outside as we drove around the city of Atlanta. So I was shocked at that. So to think, if you are an African-American person and you know that these states have these things still in place on a state flag, for crying out loud. I mean, now you can understand a little bit better why that kind of emotion just gets drummed up to such a fever pitch for
Definitely.
That movement of Black Lives Matter, because it has really permeated. It hasn't gone away, and that is so true. And so this Mississippi story, I think, is a huge step in the right direction. And I'm sure it's like dominoes. We're going to see more and more of that happening. It started with NASCAR, right? Taking away the flag, and now you're going to see it more and more and more coming out.
Well, Dave, that about wraps up episode number 10. Today's June 29th. That means there's no more episodes for June. However, a couple of guests that are lined up for the month of July, a couple of good ones. Olympian setter Kavika Shoji, and also a two-time All-American for the men's volleyball team here at the University of Hawaii, Gage Worsley. All I can say is get your popcorn ready when we have Gage on later in July, because you give him a question, and I've done this many times on post-match interviews. You give him a question, and you have no idea where he's going to go. Kid's a pistol. That's
the kind of guests we want. And by the way, after what your mom told us, her phone book of numbers, I think, is someone I'm going to tap into as far as getting some maybe players from UH past that maybe we can get connected, come on our podcast. By the way, good job. You're the one that got those guests. In fact, got your mom today and the guests coming up with Kavika Shoji and Gage Worsley. Great talking to your mom, by the way. And she didn't throw any UCLA in my face, so that was kind of decent. Although she did bring up Rayford Johnson.
Well, like she said, she wore the Honolulu blue because of the Star Bulletin Aloha shirt. You were wearing your red and cardinal gold shirt. So, I mean, for once we can say that Fight On and 8 Clap can go hand in hand for a 30-minute interview.
It went hand in hand. That's why she's such a professional, and so am I. Well, that'll do it for the Dave and Tiff podcast. Tiff, thanks again for doing what you do. Thanks for getting Cindy Lewis to join us. And until next week, we will be back again. Aloha.
Happy 4th of July. Stay safe.